not wishing to do a follow that to you, Feargal, but next up is Feargal Dalton, who grew up in Ireland, studied in Dublin, and then did an amazing thing, which was join the Royal Navy to be a submariner and a weapons engineer, which when you think about it and think about all the debates we've been having around these topics of identity and defence, is in and of itself a remarkable thing. He then came to Glasgow and is now retrained as a physics teacher. So again, just like our first speaker, he did a very interesting bit of his life, and a bit even more interesting in terms of dealing with our children and teaching them physics, which must be the best of all worlds. So Feargal, on behalf of Irish for Yes, let's hear from you. Give him a round of applause.
Did we all watch Doctor Who last night? My children did, and they were on Facebook to their cousins in Dublin who had also watched Doctor Who, as I had watched when I was a kid growing up in Dublin. And that's because growing up in Ireland, I had the choice of watching programmes on RTE, the national broadcaster, or on the BBC. And Ireland didn't need to be in a political union with the UK for me to watch Doctor Who, Ivor the Engine, Swap Shop. But not being able to watch Doctor Who in an independent Scotland is just one of the many completely ridiculous scare stories that are being put out there by the No campaign. People talk about going on their journey to yes. Well, I've never been on that journey. Having grown up in a country, a Celtic nation, that had already gained its independence from an out-of-touch, self-serving Westminster. For me, it was a case of been there, done that. Yes, Ireland, so to speak, is a subject at schools in Ireland called history. But like many immigrants who came to Scotland, I wasn't here very long when I started asking the question, why is Scotland not an independent country? And it was something I didn't have very strong feelings on. I had a long-term plan that I was going to go back to Ireland, like many immigrants. I'd already bought a flat in Belfast, actually, in 2005, 5 years before my commission in the Royal Navy was due to end. But in 2006, then, something momentous happened. I became a husband, and I became a father. And the constitutional question in Scotland became personal for me. And I want my children to have what I had. And that's to grow up in a country that has the confidence to govern itself. And from that, to be confident in themselves. My mother comes from a town called Crossmaglen in South Armagh, one of the 6 counties in the north of Ireland. And I still have many family and friends in South Armagh, County Down, and in and around Belfast. So I have crossed the UK-Irish land border, if not hundreds of times, thousands of times. And I have never once met a border guard or been asked to produce my passport. And that's because Ireland and the UK, and the Channel Islands and the Isle of Man, which are not in the UK or even in the EU, all have a common travel area. And only last year, the UK and Irish governments announced that they were increasing cooperation in this area. They were going to start sharing embassy facilities overseas, and they are just about, I think it's next month, they're just about to introduce a common visa scheme, where business people from places like China and India, emerging markets, can travel to the UK and Ireland on one travel visa. Osborne says we can't use the pound. Our pound, a pound sterling. The pound I was using in Ireland up until 1978, without the permission of anyone at Westminster. And there's your plan B, if you needed one, which we don't. In the race to outflank UKIP, many of the main UK unionist parties have become very fond of the word foreigners and referring to Scotland and independent Scotland as being a foreign country. Well, in 1949, Ireland left the Commonwealth and became a republic. London phoned Dublin and expressed sincerest best wishes. But in order to protect the legal status of Irish citizens living in the UK, the Westminster government unilaterally introduced the Ireland Act of 1949. And while this act recognises Ireland as a sovereign independent country, it states, and I quote Article 2, Ireland is not a foreign country. So if the No campaign are to be believed, and stick with me on this one, this is No campaign logic, sometimes difficult. When Scotland becomes an independent country, when I and my Glasgow-born, Irish passport-carrying children go down to England to visit family and friends, we will not be foreigners. But you guys that are living here in Scotland, when you go down to visit your family and friends in England, you will be foreigners. 2 words, I write.
I right.
And by the way, what's wrong with foreigners anyway?
Yeah. Here, here. Welcome.
Ireland had an IMF bailout 4 years ago. And the UK had an IMF bailout in 1976. And both countries, unfortunately, have suffered greatly in the last few years from the banking crisis. I know that as a councillor in Glasgow, a lot of suffering. Countries face challenges. And throughout the banking crisis, no one in Ireland at any point fell back in their chair, threw their hands up in the air and exclaimed, "Ah lads, balls to this for a game of soldiers. Get that George Osborne fella on the phone. Ask him if he'll run our country for us." Irish national self-esteem never got so low. Fear never took such a hold that the people living in Ireland even contemplated giving up their national self-determination. But instilling fear and undermining the self-confidence of the people living in Scotland is the sole strategy of the No campaign. Don't let them scare you. Be brave. Scotland the brave. And next month, vote yes. And come on in. The independence water is lovely.